and very warm welcome to this very special show with Dr. Fereidun Fesharaki, who is chairman of FACT Global Energy Group. Dr. Fesharaki, it's a pleasure having you on the show here, and the crude oil prices really have been on the top of news for the longest time now. In the last 6 to 7 months especially, we have seen a drastic change come in the scenario. The prices are half of what they were 6 to 7 months back, and the street is still divided on whether we have seen a bottom, whether the prices will just continue to stay here for a longer time, or are we looking at a rebound?
Well, we have a structural change. This is not just another cycle. This is a big structural change. Structural changes happen every 30, 40 years, and then all the equations change. So we can't use the history saying that, well, a few years it goes down, then it goes up. But we have moved the prices downwards on a long-term basis. And we have now new players. In the old days, OPEC could get together and arrange the market. Now with Russia and the US, each of them producing more than Saudi Arabia, it's no longer so easy to arrange the market.
You know, what we read, or what most of the experts really are comparing with decline, is with 2008 financial crisis. It really is not that. Would you call it more of a supply-demand mismatch?
Yes, there is no financial crisis.
Right.
And I think that's one of the big issues, that when the financial crisis came in 2009, all the refineries were losing money because there was weakness in the economy. Today, the refineries actually making pretty good money, and it is a matter of the supply becoming much bigger than demand, and the world needs to adjust downwards.
And you know, this, as you pointed out, while we are talking about higher global supplies glut and the demand isn't really catching up, there's not too much of geopolitics also playing into the market, barring of course what's happening in Libya. So would you say it just adds to the recipe of further decline in prices?
Well, if the markets are tight, geopolitics result in major upside. But when the markets are long, then the geopolitics doesn't really matter. But in fact, if you look at the trouble spots, whether it's in northern Iraq or in Libya, in Syria, there are very little real impact on the production of oil. In Libya, there is chaos. Oil production, nothing wrong with it. But even if it comes right away, it doesn't really change the big picture. The big picture has changed because of the situation with the United States, where the US is now producing 4.5 million barrels per day of oil. The US could be the second largest OPEC producer just by the incremental production in the past 4 years. So the world has really fundamentally shifted.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at 2014, of course, there has been a lot of change, as you pointed out. Fundamental changes have been there. In 2015, though, we are looking at positive returns till time in the crude oil prices. Would you call it overcrowded shorts? Are people making money? Because this is a huge speculative market as well, and that's the reason it tends to move so volatile.
Right. I think that there is the speculators can play within the boundaries. But the realities of the market don't go away, that we have too much inventory stock build. The demand is weak. Many countries have done what India has done. They removed the subsidies. So the lower prices are not translating to a rebound in demand. I mean, this is very dramatic. The demand growth in 2014 and 15 will be half of what we've seen in the past 15 years. So the Asian miracle, as far as oil demand is concerned, has slowed down significantly. So the supply goes up, the demand doesn't go up, and then you have this crisis. But I don't think we have seen the floor yet. Sometimes in the second quarter, April, May, we expect to see somewhere in the range of $35 to $45 oil, a lot lower than it is today.
Dr. Fesharaki, you spoke about the demand growth, and which has come down to half is what you're expecting going forward as well. But what about the supply growth? How are you looking at that in 2015, even 16 for that matter?
Well, despite the lower prices, the supply will continue pretty much like last year. Because when you have lower prices, it takes between 9 months to 12 months, even for the shale producers in the US to trim down the operations. You can't just switch it off. So 2015 is much the same way as 2014, despite the chaos in the oil market. If there is any change that we want to see in the market, we have to see it next year or the year after. For that, the Saudis need to see a reduction in the growth in the US production, and they also need to see the Iraqis come to the table being willing to cut. The latter may be more difficult to achieve than the former.
Sure. And apart from all of these producers, it also has to do with the consumers. If you look at the economies of Eurozone or Japan or China, which are still talking about easy money, do you see recoveries coming in here? Do you see demand picking up from these economies for this year?
Really, no. I think that if we exclude the US, in the industrialized world, demand for oil peaked in 2006. We are always losing demand. Either we lose it fast or lose it slowly, but there is no scenario even stabilizing. So the demand growth is only in the emerging markets. And emerging markets, China, India, even the Persian Gulf countries themselves, Latin America, all have slowed down. So you have a fundamental slowing down. It's not going to be changed by any particular policy. But in the US, where there is a boom, the demand growth is actually there. There, the battle between efficiency for the cars and passion of the Americans to drive big cars. Net, probably a few 100,000 barrels per day growth, but the rest of the world is pretty docile.
I want to bring your attention back to China because that is the world's second biggest consumer when it comes to crude, and they really imported quite record numbers in 2014. In 2015, there's an expectation that there would be a slowdown from them as well. China being the bigger commodity consumer, do you see concerns and demand also driven because of that?
Well, two things, issues have happened in China and India. Both countries, diesel demand has come to a halt. And both of the countries, people were counting on the diesel demand growth. Partly is the higher prices in India. In China is the maturity of the economy and the fact that you can't keep growing at the breakneck speeds in the past. So I think that the growth of the economy, use of other commodities may continue. But on the energy side, there is going to be significant slowdown compared to the past. Chinese will grow about half of what they did 2 or 3 years ago in terms of volume.
Okay, let's talk about OPEC then, because the latest trigger really was from OPEC because they wanted to safeguard their market share. How would you rank their strategy in doing that? Do you think that they really have been able to achieve what they went out to do?
Well, these days OPEC is Saudi Arabia, so they are the only ones which have extra capacity. And they are the only ones which adjusted the market upwards and downwards. The rest of the people produce at maximum.
So would you say somewhere OPEC has erred? Because as you said, they are perhaps 2 years too late. But do you think they would continue to withhold that pressure that they have wanted on the US shale production there?
Yes, I mean, you need to think of a traffic jam in Bombay, where there is one single policeman standing there trying to direct the traffic. And that single policeman actually is not OPEC, it's the Saudis. Everybody is hooting and shouting and screaming, and he says, listen to me, and if you don't, I'll leave. So he left, and all the cars have got stuck. And he says, I'll come back and direct the traffic when all of you are prepared to listen. At this point in time, they're still not prepared to listen. It's not just outside shale, it's also the Iraqis. Iraqis are rebel groups. They don't want to listen. The Iranians are on sanctions. As soon as the production goes up, they don't want to cut back. They need to let them suffer long enough so that they're all prepared to sacrifice something. And when they do it, the Saudis are prepared to do it and more. But they're not going to do it alone and carry the burden for everyone else.
Sure. Dr. Fesharaki, that comparison with Bombay traffic really put the point across. All right. Since you keep pointing about the Saudis here, I mean, there has been a change of guard there recently. Do you see any change in policies there when it comes to energy?
I don't. Of course, the oil minister has been kept in his position, and it would have been a mistake in the middle of this crisis to change him. He's asked to be retired many, many times. So it's possible sometimes this year, later this year or next year, that he would retire. But the basic policy in Saudi Arabia is made by the royal family.
So what you really are saying is that most of these OPEC members do not have a say. It's Saudi Arabia, whatever they lead, others would have to follow that?
Yes.
But we have heard a lot of dissent in other voices. Do you?
Yeah, there is a lot of dissent because people say, why don't you cut your production so I can produce my maximum? This is what they say. And the Saudi says no. Because if we look at their production, everybody has produced at the maximum capability. Only the people who cut were the Saudis. So really nobody else has any say. They can complain. They complain, why don't you cut more? Saudi says, that's what I say. I cut, you cut, they cut. We all cut together. No, you cut so that we can all enjoy it. This is no longer going to work.
We are looking at these higher outputs coming in from OPEC at 30 million barrels per day, and even more because the OPEC really hasn't been able to keep up to their quota there. There has been higher output continuing from US, from Russia, from non-OPEC countries as well. Do you see this scenario going on for a very long time, or are people going to really take notice of where the prices are headed?
Well, in many countries there is a boss. The Saudis have a boss, Iraqis have a boss, Russians have a boss, but in the US there is no boss. The boss is the price, and there are thousands of small players. They all play a role, and there is not one break-even point. You can't arrange with the minister, please tell them not to produce, because they will do whatever they want. So it takes time, and we believe that at around $40 a barrel, you will cut 70% of the growth, but you will only see the impact in 2016. For other countries, in Canada, the oil sands, already multi-billion dollars investments are made. There is no change, at least through 2020. In other countries, the production will go until they feel the pain so much that they find it in their advantage to cut.
What's your sense? Because the crude oil price decline has treated the developed world and the Asian emerging markets very differently. Do you see that most of these Asian emerging markets as of now are perhaps in a bit of a sweet spot?
I think so. I think actually the burden of subsidies taken off the Indian government, I mean, this is a major burden. They got themselves to this hole. They kept issuing this, I don't want to call it worthless bonds, but the bonds they issued, and they just paid people up, essentially put the nation in debt year and year after each other. So this has come to an end, and this is the best way to end it, by the opportunity provided by the price decline. If the prices had not fallen, nobody would be brave enough to reduce the subsidies.
So what's your sense when it comes to India really? Because even as the prices have come to half of what they were 6 to 7 months back, India has no storage capacity. We do not do forward contracts. All those policies are still into making. So would you say even as we have seen a good last 4 or 5 months, we haven't been able to capitalize onto it that good?
In terms of improving methods of operation by using either more storage, more forward market, these are all sort of commercial issues. But as far as the economy is concerned, things are much better. The burden has been lifted off the government and the nation. That's a great, great, great privilege.
Sure. With the new government coming in, there is this talk about Make in India, and there have been large investments, estimates come out that would perhaps see deployment into this sector in sense of pipelines, infrastructure. Do you see India really ready to get into all of that?
No, but God didn't give so much resources to India. I mean, the government can make it easier or better, but the most important thing the government can do, which hasn't done, is do something about gas prices. The Congress party did better, frankly. They were on the brink of they finalized the price of gas, and the new government, to my surprise, had a step back. There is a lot of gas resources in India, not oil resources, gas resources in India sitting and not being utilized. And instead, India goes outside and imports. This is not good for the country, it's not good for the industry. This is, I think, the policy changes to take place is on the gas side. On the oil side, I think even if India is very, very liberal in offering blocks, everybody knows there's nothing dramatic in India. So a little bit more maybe. At the moment, the only takers are ONGC, then maybe a couple more people come in, but no dramatic change. But we can make a big difference on the gas side in India by changing the policy dramatically, and this has been lacking.
Yeah, I remember because last time you came to India, you had spoken about gas price formula and how you weren't really happy with the way the things were working in that direction. With the current prices, the way it's moving now in the international markets, do you see even more burden now coming in for the gas prices?
I think the situation is worse now than it was before, because before I objected against the lack of transparency of this. Essentially, you decided the price and then came up with a formula to fit it. That's not the right way to do it. But the net result was still a much more respectable number. Now, interestingly, $8.40, which had come up by the government at that time, would be pretty much what the LNG imports today in India would be. But $5.60 still is too low. This is sort of way out of line, and I think it kills the incentive for state-owned companies, for GSPC, for ONGC to look for gas, and certainly the Reliance D6 volume will not increase. There has been always this assumption that somehow Reliance is hiding all this gas, and if you force them, they produce more. But the reality of the market is that nobody shoots themselves in the foot. If they could produce it, they would produce it.
Especially the kind of situation we are in right now, where the UK prices are going down. There has been so much currency fluctuation, whether it's the ruble, if not so much for the Russian gas prices there. Looking at all of that and how India derives prices, I mean, we really are getting into a very volatile, even lower zone, wouldn't you say that?
I think that what we need to do is to get, rather than pretend, the previous formula was a pretend formula, that I will add something about what does UK got to do with India? What does US has to do with India? We have to worry about what the Japanese do, what the Koreans do, what the Chinese do, what the Pakistanis do, what the neighbors do. In another continent, it doesn't matter. So rather than pretend something, come up and say, I will come up with a policy which relates to real market forces. And maybe because it's sensitive, I give it a ceiling. I don't allow it to go above $10. But below that, I let the market operate. And I think this kind of things works, but I think that worrying about the UK prices is an irrelevant concept.
When you look at FY14, the oil and gas sector totaled up to nearly 36% of the total import bill. If we are looking at that kind of number for FY15 as well, would you say that we perhaps are in a better state of matters because the prices have gone down and India's bill in that sense would be slightly better?
Absolutely, yes. I don't think this low prices will last forever, but I don't think we're going to go back to $100 for a long time. So basically, it's going to provide more money, more momentum for the economy, and give a strength to the economies all over Asia and India, particularly. For a lot of people in India which can use gas, and we shouldn't forget that huge amount of gas-fired capacity is shut in India. This is such a tragedy that you have the capacity but you close it. The lower prices might provide incentive if the policy takes advantage of this, like they took advantage of the lower oil prices. Take advantage of this and come up with something which works. I think we can have much more prosperous India and much better usage and much more efficient usage of natural gas.
Fingers crossed to that. But also, how would you put India ahead then? Would you say that we are better off importing, with the kind of prices there are, or should India look at self-reliance in some sense?
Self-reliance these days is meaningless, really. This is an old-fashioned socialist concept. Neither the Russians or the Chinese look at that anymore. We should do what is economically worthwhile. But it is possible that because of the sensitivity of the power sector and the users of the lower income families, that you put some limits. You say, I put a limit on where the price can go. Beyond that, I try to foot it. But below that, I let you buy. And this is the golden opportunity, because if you say that, like the Chinese are looking at it, $10 would be my limit. Below $10, when you buy whatever the market provides. And tell the power companies that you cannot insist and expect APM gas at $5.60. It is basically is nonsense to expect some unreasonable number to be sustained. Let them play, and they actually, instead of $5.60, they probably pay $7.50. It's not that huge. Many of them can afford it, and they can get used to actually playing in the market and be part of the real world rather than being part of the shielded, protected world.
So just to summarize on what we spoke, what are those 2 or 3 things that you think Indians should look at when it comes to the oil and gas sector?
I think the number one issue is that the issue of we have to have a relationship with the market. We can say we go totally market, or we are a portion of the market, or we are 50%, 70%, but we have to be related to the market. Second is that we need to see what we can do to encourage production. One of the issues that many people may not know is that if ONGC produces any oil, they can only sell it at $40 a barrel. So I don't say that they don't produce it because they can't get it, but certainly it doesn't give the incentive and the capital to go there. Other people, if Can India produce it, they can sell it at the market. But ONGC is capped. This is a mistake. You try to give incentive and let the state companies move forward in line with the world. They have the ability and they have the desire. The government has a responsibility to keep an eye on them.
So while the next 6-12 months, as you said, we might see further decline coming in for prices. I think you mentioned a level of $35, $40 on the lower side as well. But since we are talking about structural change, as you put it, how would you look at the prices then for the next 5 to 10 years?
I think we're going to be in the range of $50 to $80 a barrel. It's going to go up and down. I think that if we look for a 20-year period, by 2030, maybe the prices will go back to $100 again.
So before we end this conversation, I'm going to just put across some words or themes to you, and I would want your immediate take on that: scope, importance, progress going forward, etc. So since we have seen crude oil prices decline so much, what's your sense now on alternate energy?
Alternate energy, in our view, by that, if you mean solar and wind, base case, they need $120, $130 oil price to break even. Now, that is, we can go to a village in India and it makes sense because you can't bring oil there, you can't bring gas there. So I'm not talking about the specific cases, I'm talking about general case. So this means more subsidy until technology reduces the cost. And if you want more alternatives, we have to subsidize it more. That's the bottom line.
Biofuels and fossil energy.
Well, biofuels is a love story. Biofuels, all of these things come when the price of oil is high. The price of oil is not high. Biofuels, biodiesel, you take a whole country like Singapore and they give you 10,000 barrels per day.
So what would you say, next 10 years, are we looking at alternate energy, renewable energy, fossils, biofuels? Do all these industries have any chance in next 10 years?
I don't think they do.
Very quick take on Iran, your home country.
In Iran, Iran is a gas country. Iraq is an oil country, Iran is a gas country. But if there is an agreement between Iran and 5+1, they say mid-March they're hoping to reach an agreement. The moment they reach an agreement, the prices will fall $10 a barrel minimum. So they have a two-edged sword. On the one hand, they want agreement. On the other hand, they don't want to see the prices going down. The reality is that lifting the US sanction against Iran fully, almost impossible. This is going to be a painful dance, but there is no kiss, there is no marriage. So it's going to be very, very slow, and not full removal of sanctions, not full return of Iran can happen in the next few years.
You have been in this sector of energy for the longest time. I mean, you are this
100 years almost.
100 years, all right. You are this one big word when it comes to energy and in the world, global markets. How do you see energy as a sector for young job aspirants? And what would you advise them?
I still think it's very exciting. It's new, it's dynamic, and most importantly, it's unpredictable. So you never get bored with it. Every day you go to work, you're going to come back and say, oh my God, things have changed. I still think it has great potential, and I hope that with change of policy in India, for the youth in India, it offers greater and greater potential.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Fesharaki. It has been lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.